All right, interview with Conor Mclean, take one. And by take one, I mean we're only doing this once.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So, hello and welcome to The Voice. My name is Joseph Salama. I'm an editor at The Voice, and I am here today with Conor Mclean, who is the presidential candidate for Huskies United. Thank you for taking a couple minutes out of your day to come and talk to us.
No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just dive right into it. Our first question we have is, one of the most important functions of the president remains the leadership of the BOD. How do you see this role fitting into the new job description of the president, and what experiences do you have that will assist you in fulfilling this role?
Okay. In terms of the new structure, I still see the president is still going to be the person chairing meetings, leading board meetings, working within as the leadership figure for the entire board of directors. So while the vice presidential position now has kind of a role responding to the internals of the organization, I still feel the president is still the leader of the board. And so as such, I think it's going to be really important for the president to be able to basically build unity within each board member. Whoever ends up getting elected from different tickets next year, they all need to be able to work together to be able to serve students, because that's what the ACW is all about. Yeah. So the president really needs to be able to lead that. So making sure that the different students who are working in those positions are able to bond with one another, meeting with them one-on-one, asking them about their issues, understanding specifically, like trying to work with them within their positions. Specifically as president, I want to make sure that they're getting the needs that for the tasks they want to be doing. If Director of Diversity Efforts wants to be doing, have a specific task they want to do or has a goal, I want to be able to help make sure that they have the means to get that done. From my experience, I've been involved in student leadership for 4 years now on the RTSA executive board. I was in charge of chairing, or not chairing, I guess, but leading a group. I took groups to different student leadership conferences where they learned about networking and other programming opportunities. So that was something where I was in charge of leading that group to go to those conferences. Last year, I served as the ACW Finance and Budget Director, so I chaired both the Special Appropriations meeting and Finance and Budget Committee meetings. So I was able to, one, facilitate conversations, facilitate tough discussions, especially when it came to the budget. Last year, we still had some, obviously, budget cuts we went through as well. So getting the committee to come up with recommendations about where we wanted to prioritize the recommendations to the Board of Directors, especially the board sent 2 or 3 different requests back to the F&B committee, and so I had to relay those requests to the committee, come up with strategies, and come up with something to give back to the board, and then be able to present that information to the board in a way that everyone understood, and so that the board was able to come up with a clear and concise decision.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second question is a little bit more tough, and it's just related directly to campaign.
Okay.
The seeds of your ticket were planted well before the recent reforms to the ACW. Mm-hmm. And how did you adjust your ticket and your strategies in response to these changes?
Okay, great question, actually. When the changes were going through, and about January, February, like again, we were hearing that these changes might happen, and so as heading in this ticket, and we were still trying to find people to fill these positions. We were just kind of waiting because we realized that after these changes were going to go through, we'd have to react. So basically, the 2 positions were obviously the Director of Organizational Relations was taken away, Director of Communications was added, and primarily the responsibilities of the Vice President changed. So I spoke with my Vice President after the changes went through, or while we thought they were about to go through. I was just had a conversation with the current Vice Presidential candidate, Jocelyn McCurtain, on her ticket, asking her about what she thought the new changes would be. And so, like, what we found was that she still, one, was really passionate about the position for what it offered and actually had the experiences and qualifications needed. She's been the director of 2 different entities within the ACW, UW Leaders, as well as the Committee Organizing Rape Education Core. So she has the experience within ACW. She knows how ACW functions internally. So she still had that passion and desire to want to be vice president. So I kind of let that as her. I asked her that question. I was like, "Do you still want to be vice president?" And she said yes. Mm-hmm. So the other position was communications, which obviously we didn't have filled at all. So our strategy in going about that was trying to. I spoke to the members of my ticket and said, "Look, this is a brand new position. It can really be anything. Like, we can make this what we want. Obviously, there's responsibilities in the bylaws about what this position wants to do. There's ideas that the current board wants of this to be able to reach out to different students. So how can we go about doing that? Let's find someone who has those qualifications, who has that experience, communicating with different groups, communicating among different students that can really fulfill that role." And so we outreached to a few people we thought might be qualified, and I kind of asked them questions. Members of our ticket sat down and asked them what they thought about thought about that position and what it could do, and then we ended up making our decision. So we didn't respond too much, I guess, besides just trying. Director of communications was the biggest one.
Yeah, and it's good to get that clarification.
Yeah.
Let's see. So back to you as a presidential candidate. What qualifications and past experiences do you have that effectively represent the student voice in Olympia?
Excellent question. This year I spent most of my time, since I'm not working in ACW. Earlier this year I really got involved in Barking Against Budget Cuts. That OGR started in about December. So I was involved in December, January, and February, organizing with that. I was specifically basically behind a lot of the organizing efforts behind the Rally to Restore Funding, which we put on in February, which efforts were basically just to educate students about what the budget cuts were doing and what they could do about it. We had speakers. We tried to get a whole bunch of students to come and just kind of, it was during passing time, so students could just walk and see what was happening. It was just we wanted to just kind of have this shock of, hey, we're having this rally. Yeah. And at the same time, they were also doing the postcards that have been so successful, trying to get students to just do those simple things, because a lot of students don't want to take that extra effort, or they're intimidated by the process of lobbying or what they have to do for legislators. And so basically just saying, hey, fill out this postcard, you can write a message if you want, or we'll fill out a message for you. And we just want to be able to show legislators that students actually care and that we have the numbers to back it up. And that's been really successful. So helping out with BARC, I've been down to Olympia on a couple other occasions. One with the lobby days. I was a team leader for the lobby days with ASUW, so went down with a bunch of students there. Separately, I've been down on a couple different occasions just with a small group of people to pull legislators off of the floor. We went down about a month ago. We spoke with the Senate Majority Leader Lisa Brown concerning a bill that would affect the UPass, as well as a bill that would have given significant funding for student parents who really need that form of financial aid. And so we spoke. I met with my senator, personally, who was actually standing against the child care funding bill to try to get him to sway, and eventually at the end of the day he did. Unfortunately, the bill, for whatever reasons, wasn't able to make it through, but he at least changed his mind. And then I was just down here about a week ago, actually. There's a current bill right now that would give tuition setting authority to the Board of Regents, and I went down there just to try to pull legislators off the floor, to tell them from a student standpoint why we don't support this, especially in its current form, like why that would be bad, and why we as students want to retain the ability to be able to go to those legislators and go talk with them like I was doing, to tell them our concerns about tuition, our concerns about state funding, because if it was at the Board of Regent level, we wouldn't have that ability.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the next question we have is, students don't know what ACW does. Like we constantly hear this, and we see it online, and we see it in just words and just what people say. Like, we don't know what ACW does, and it oftentimes leads to apathy in the whole process and to the organization as a whole. Describe a tangible plan to change this.
I think number one reason, I think, just to speak on why students don't care from my perspective, is students who even are involved in this campus, if they're involved in one of the over 700 student groups, or if they're involved in their living community, if they live in the Greek community, wherever or they're in their house with their roommates, wherever they may, they just don't see exactly what ASUW does for them. Yep. And that's ASUW's fault for not publicizing that as well enough, but it's also, I think, our responsibility to make sure that we're actually giving the needs that those students want. So, for instance, for students who do want to be involved in this campus, the ASUW is not the only way to get involved. There's tons and tons of different student groups. And if we're not meeting the needs of those student groups or being able to provide resources for them that they can use, they may not necessarily see the necessity of ASUW. So I think a tangible plan would be to work with my board to make sure that we're giving those resources. Right now we have special appropriations, which gives out funding for basically putting on special events, but maybe looking into what are other ways that we could financially help RSOs that are in need, that want to grow, that want to reach out and bring students in, because they offer all these unique opportunities that students might want, but they're restricted in some way, whether that's space, whether that's funding, whatever it may be, and trying to come up with, working within Office of Student Life to find ways to be able to meet RSO needs better. I think another one, obviously, is one way that is just really obviously that affects everyone, is the budget cuts, and we're lobbying constantly to make sure that there is state funding and that we aren't being basically screwed in the quality of education going down and the costs going up. Yeah. And that's something that ASUW has taken a stance on in the last couple of years, is really, really fought for. And so that's something which I think which just being able to be visible with Office of Government Relations this year has tried to we put on the Rally to Restore Funding with BARC Against Budget Cuts. continually driving those efforts, because I believe until we get that visibility out there from the grassroots, kind of going down and building up, we need students to be able to see on an everyday basis as they're walking through, because every student is busy, they have class, they have their own concerns. Inconveniencing them by telling them to come to these meetings or come here or come do this doesn't really appeal to them. But if they can do something while they're walking to class or wherever they may be, just that one, obviously, yes, it affects them, budget cuts do affect them, but they want it to be convenient for them. And that's what I think ACW needs to do. We need to figure out how can we make it convenient for students to be involved in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. We have just one more question.
Okay.
How do you plan on working with the incoming UW president? The individual will be announced on Monday.
Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a good day. And how do you hope to work with the Board of Regents to push forward student priorities?
Great question. Obviously, I think as soon as that new president is announced, being able to meet with them and just introduce myself as a candidate running for president, as a student, individual concerns I have as a student, really seeing where the new president sees student priorities and sees the need for student voice, because I want to make sure that that's a priority for them, that the new president realizes that, yes, they're in charge of running this university, but students are the integral part of that university. And so student voice is very, very important. And the president, I want that president, one, realize that from just perspective of someone, from a student and someone who may be president, and also two, so that way we can start collaboration efforts early. If I were to become president, what I would want to do to work with them just so that we have a united voice as much as possible, especially with the fight against budget cuts, that both people would be going down to Olympia to make sure that students and administration are on the same page as much as possible. If there is local control, if that ends up going through, working with the president to make sure that our voices are being heard and our concerns are being met. If we have a concern that front-loading tuition might occur. So if tuition is proposed at 30% 1 year, that is a huge issue for myself personally. Someone who's a senior who's only going to be around for another year, but also students in general, that's not really predictable. 30% 1 year is not something that students will be able to react to. So I want to make sure that essentially that the president realizes that student voice is important and that they realize what that student voice is. Yeah. Same thing with the Board of Regents. As an ex officio member, giving reports, not just to be like, hey, here's what the students have been doing, but really bringing up concerns to the Board of Regents of students. So they continually recognize that they meet every month, what's been changing in that month to month, what are the concerns now, what are the concerns maybe seeing in the future, so they can get a student perspective, because so many of them don't, and that's a concern that many regents say, is they don't necessarily understand what the students want, or they'll ask the ACW president, well, what do students feel about this? Consistently being able to have that information and have that ability to say, well, if there's a standing student opinion from ACW Senate, here's how students feel, or here's just the general tendency on campus for students, especially if it's concerning budget cuts. Obviously, our quality of education is going down. Students are realizing this. They're getting upset from the students we've been talking to. So giving that perspective from just a personal student perspective to the Board of Regents.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all we have time for. But
okay.
I just wanted to thank you for coming.